Hi, and welcome back to History Made Simply. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing the dark history of Thanksgiving. Every November, families gather around tables across America to give thanks. We picture peace, friendship, and a feast shared between Pilgrims and Native Americans, a symbol of unity. But the true history of Thanksgiving is far more complicated. It's a story of survival and suffering, generosity and betrayal, and the beginning of a long, dark chapter in American history. The arrival. In 1620, a ship called the Mayflower carried just over 100 English settlers across the ocean. They weren't called pilgrims yet, they were just desperate people, fleeing religious persecution and searching for land and freedom. After 2 brutal months at sea, they landed not in Virginia as planned, but on the cold, rocky coast of Cape Cod, a place already inhabited by the Wampanoag people for over 12,000 years. When exploring the coast, looking for a place to settle, they came upon an abandoned village, which had been a recently exterminated native community following a devastating epidemic between 1616 and 1619, more than likely introduced by earlier European traders and explorers. The Pilgrims found graves, skeletons, and underground storage pits filled with corn and beans. They took the food and recorded it in their journals. They took what they could, believing it to be God's providence. What they didn't realize, or simply chose to ignore, was that the entire village lay empty with crops unharvested was not land prepared by God, but was only there because its native people had already perished. Winter was cruel. By spring, half the settlers were dead. Starvation, disease, exposure had ravaged their numbers. Graves were hidden in the snow, so nearby tribes wouldn't see how weak they'd become. Historical records from the Pilgrims' own journals described how they dug up native graves soon after landing, taking corn and other goods. They justified it as divine intervention. The Lord showed us where to find corn. In reality, it was theft. To the Indigenous people, it was desecration of their dead. A fragile alliance. Then came a turning point. A man named Tisquantum, known to history as Squanto, approached the starving settlers. He taught them how to plant corn in the sandy soil, where to fish, and how to survive. His story was one of tragedy. Years earlier, Squanto had been kidnapped by an English explorer and sold into slavery in Spain. He escaped, learned English, and returned home, only to find his entire tribe had been wiped out by disease brought by European ships. He was the last of his people, and now he used his knowledge to help these strangers live. He helped the Pilgrims, partly because he had no people left. He was a man caught between two worlds, serving those who represented both his survival and his people's destruction. Squanto served as an interpreter and an intermediary between the English settlers and the Massasoits Wampanoag for about 2 years until his death in 1622. The Wampanoag leader, Massasoit, saw an opportunity for an alliance with the settlers against rival tribes, and so an uneasy friendship began. The reality about this unity was that it was political alliance and nothing more. For the Wampanoag, they needed allies and saw the English settlers as useful in their strategic military alliance. The Pilgrims, weak from disease and hunger, vitally needed protection. It was diplomacy, not friendship at the core. The first Thanksgiving. In autumn 1621, after the settlers' first successful harvest, a feast was held in Plymouth. For 3 days, about 50 English settlers and 90 Wampanoag men gathered. There was food, including venison, wild fowl, corn and fish, but also tension. The Wampanoag arrived armed, uncertain of the colonists' intentions, after hearing gunfire, likely part of the Pilgrims' celebrations. Though they never received an invite to this feast, they joined and contributed deer and food. Still, for a brief moment, peace existed. The English gave thanks to their gods for survival. The Wampanoag gave thanks to the land, as they always had. It was not yet a national holiday, just a fragile truce in a world about to burn. The Shattered Peace. In the years that followed, more English ships arrived, thousands of settlers bringing with them more disease. Native populations fell by as much as 90% from smallpox and measles. The alliance broke apart. Land was seized. Promises were broken. In 1637, the Massachusetts Bay Colony's governor, John Winthrop, declared a day of thanks for their victory over the Pequot tribe, whose village at Mystic had just been burned, killing over 700 men, women and children. That day of Thanksgiving celebrated extermination, not peace. By 1675, Massasoit's son, Metacom, known to the English as King Philip, led one of the bloodiest wars in American history. Villages burned on both sides, and thousands died. When Metacom was captured, he was beheaded, and his head was displayed on a pike at Plymouth for 2 decades as a warning. For Native Americans, this was no Thanksgiving. It was the beginning of loss of land, language, and life within a generation. In truth, less than 50 years after that first Thanksgiving feast, the alliance was destroyed. Land stolen, broken treaties, and disease left the Wampanoag desperate. A nation rewrites the story. Centuries later, the myth took shape. In 1863, during the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln declared Thanksgiving a national holiday, not to remember the Wampanoag, but to unite a divided nation at war with itself. It was not to commemorate native friendship. The comforting myth of Pilgrims and Native Americans was popularized for children as a way of erasing the violence of colonization. The story was rewritten. Pilgrims and natives sharing food, living in harmony. A simple tale for a complicated past. But beneath the legend lies the truth that Thanksgiving was born from both kindness and conquest. Not to mention, the people we call pilgrims referred to themselves as separatists or saints. The romantic term Pilgrim Fathers only became popular 200 years later as part of the efforts to mythologize them as founders chosen by destiny. A day of mourning. Today, since 1970, while millions celebrate, Native communities gather at Coles Hill in Plymouth, Massachusetts for the National Day of Mourning, a remembrance for the suffering of the Indigenous people. They honor their ancestors, the ones who welcome strangers with open hands and pay with their homeland. It's not about rejecting gratitude, but about remembering genocide, loss of land, and cultural erasure that followed European arrival. For them, Thanksgiving isn't about the beginning of a nation, it's the beginning of centuries of survival. This National Day of Mourning was established in 1970 after the Wampanoag activist Wamsuta Frank James was barred from giving a speech at Plymouth celebration that white organisers deemed too critical. So he and others gathered at Coles Hill instead, making the first National Day of Mourning. Thanksgiving is not just about a feast, but a reflection, a reminder that history is never one story, but many voices, some silenced, some forgotten, all waiting to be heard. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and watch our next episode.